Hi, welcome to Innovation Root Studio. I'm your host Noopur, and today I'm really excited to have Mr. Puneet Gupta with us. Puneet is currently the CTO of Global Logic. He is an industry veteran with nearly 20 years of experience in global technology and digital consulting services. Hi Puneet, welcome to our studio.
Thank you.
So Puneet, why is digital transformation so important in today's world? And how does it help to innovate better and connect deeper with the customers?
In my opinion, if I look back what has been happening in the industry last 2 years, and if I were to chart a next 3-4 years future, I think digital transformation is perhaps the biggest theme right now. What is important is to notice how our lives have changed in the last 5-7 years. The way we may not realize, because things around us are happening so fast that we are constantly getting into new normal, thinking that is the default way of doing things. But if you were to just contrast your behavior in terms of how you used to live life 5-7 years back, you will notice that the way you think, way you operate, way you execute, way you decide, way you influence, way you purchase, way you enjoy, everything has fundamentally changed. Now look at how enterprises work, and if you give a serious look, they don't feel a whole lot different from how they used to operate 5-10 years back. So if your world is changing, every business is in the business of dealing with some kind of consumer. If consumers' world has completely changed, but you haven't changed that much, there is something wrong that is going on. And I think that's the challenge that most organizations are going through. They have dealt with technology very tactically. It was like lights being on. So you need the necessary technology. So you hire a CIO, give him or her some budget, and then forget about it, and somebody will take care of the basic technology infrastructure. You have email, you have intranet, you have the basic things working. But companies increasingly are realizing that their fundamental existence is being challenged, or their business is being disrupted by companies whom you never thought are your competitors. So I think the realization needs to come at the C-suite. The CEO should be worried about what is my technology strategy. It can no longer be relegated as an infrastructure topic that some senior leader in your company is looking at it. You need to answer how Uber disrupted the entire transportation industry.
Without no cars.
with self-driving cars, and what several exciting startups are doing. The car industry is figuring out that the new consumer is perhaps not going to buy cars tomorrow. And therefore, how you designed the cars, what was important, that paradigm is shifting. And these guys were caught napping. And this is happening in each industry. In education industry, the biggest education players are saying, a Khan Academy comes and changes the fundamentals of how people are consuming content. And they are sort of figuring out, they were leaders for so long that they believe nothing could happen, and now they are having existential crisis. So the CEOs, and in my opinion, even the boards of the companies, need to start thinking about, just as I know what my finance strategy is, supply chain strategy is, what my technology strategy is, how am I going to respond to this new world order, respond to this consumer who is so massively distracted, has so massive different options. So the fundamentals, really, I cannot emphasize the point that the world around has fundamentally changed at so many different levels, and therefore there is a need to recalibrate. I think the second important point is an intelligent leader has to realize that how I think is no longer necessarily a good representative of how my consumer thinks. And therefore, if technology has not so far become a very fundamental, integral part of my life, it has to your consumers. And therefore, you have to sort of figure out that you have to answer this question without understanding how to answer this question. And therefore, you need to figure out how to build the right talent, right culture, encourage young leaders who think and operate more like the world outside. And most importantly, get inspired by it all, rather than this seeming like a problem that you need to solve. one thing that inspires me particularly is the fact that there is a very small difference between imagination and realization. If you have imagined and if you are inspired by an idea, the ability to execute it is not difficult. There is such a wonderful ecosystem that exists out there. It doesn't matter whether you have the capability. If you have spotted an opportunity, if you have an idea, if you can imagine the art of the possible, you can work with the ecosystem to make it happen. So I think what is required is inspiration about the new future and making sure that you're sort of doing the necessary things in resetting your organization culture, encouraging the right people who are thinking about the future, taking bold steps where required, taking quick small steps that are required. So digital, to summarize, I think is the new electricity, is the way you will have to run your business, and therefore you will have to be very, very strategic about it, and that would be my view.
What is your suggestion for small or medium-sized companies who have these inhibitions about finances and budgets?
Yeah, very good question. I think as long as you look at technology and digital as a cost line item, you're getting it completely wrong. That was the world when I described looking at technology or digital as a CIO line item who's taking care of essentials. It's always a burden on you. It's that 1% and 2% of the revenue that you're spending on something, and a CEO or a CFO would happily want to give the shareholders this 2% extra margin than spending on it if it were not essential. So I think thinking has to shift from cost to ROI. Especially for small and medium enterprises, there is an opportunity to get significant competitive levers by using digital in a way that large organizations are not today doing. Okay, look at what has happened with this e-commerce aggregators, the Amazons of the world, or in India, Flipkarts of the world. Suddenly, if you are a small creator, you like to do paintings, you build handicraft, or you're a shopkeeper. So that shopkeeper, his world perhaps was few blocks around where his shop were, and now the entire world is his market. So the important point is, if you keep looking at technology as a cost, it's an essential thing that you got to do because everybody is doing it, you are getting it wrong. If you start figuring about what is the problem, what is the business opportunity, and how can technology or digital let me do this thing better, and if you design it well, you are talking about return of investment in 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, 24 months. The moment you start seeing there is additional revenue or additional profit at the end of game when I put X amount of technology investment, then it doesn't matter whether you are a small business or a big business. As long as you're spending less than the benefit you are realizing, it's a great investment. So I think that's very critical, and perhaps the opportunity for entrepreneurs, startups, small, medium-sized organizations is much larger because you are not constrained by the way big organizations have been designed and operating. You all need to just get inspired, look around how others are doing it, and be smart about dealing with technology.
According to your experiences, what are the 3 common challenges across industries which are stopping organizations to adopt digital transformation?
This is a question that I keep thinking a lot because a part of my day job is to work with leaders across enterprises and imagine with them what digital can do and do what it takes to realize the end benefits. An important part of this is this challenge of helping people realize what is the quantum of ambition that you need to have. Okay, so I think the first big challenge is technology or digital not being looked at as a strategic lever at the CEO or a board level. The point I was making earlier, when the CEO realizes that a significant dimension of my competitive differentiation is technology, then things will start moving top down. So I think that's very important, making sure that right strategic leader, the business leader who's responsible for a function, believes this digital technology is important, as opposed to the technology organizations constantly selling the idea that we need more budgets, we need more digital, we need more technology. So I think first challenge is that drive is not happening from the right direction. It is more bottom up technology departments pushing the agenda forward, as opposed to the business leadership really driving it.
Does that require the business leadership to be experts in technology side?
No, I don't think so. I think, and even for technologists, being expert or adept at every interesting technology that you talk about has become almost an impossible task. It's become such huge, complex phenomena. So I think it is not required. What is required is to be inspired by that. It is that common sense understanding and articulation, looking at how your kids, how your teenagers, how the young employees in your organization, it is just getting out of your offices and looking at the real world and just being inspired in terms of how they do. How do you catch their attention? How do you get them to decide? How do you influence them? I think once that appreciation is there, then ability to build a strategy which sounds very common sense. As long as these technology strategies or digital strategies are very complex, a lot of consultants make a lot of money trying to come up with complex strategies. I think to me it is so very evident. The world around you is changing, therefore how do you change, and hence A, hence B, and hence C. So I think it's not very important that you understand technology. You must get inspired by technology. I've seen a lot of leaders who are trying to bring in some young members in the team and sort of doing reverse mentoring kind of programs, because they want to really understand. They are inspired. They want to understand, how do you think? Why do you think this is right use of your time? Because it doesn't occur to me, because I have been brought up and have lived a very different life. So I think that inspiration is important. Related to this is the important part that you got to spot the right challenge. While I'm saying that using digital should almost sound like common sense, but then executing that is not a straightforward and trivial task. So you need to get the right experts, encourage the right young talent, hire experts, give strategic positions and prominence. Okay, if you have gotten somebody to drive transformation, you must enable her to do the job right. So I think that's very important. So I think the first part to your question is this being driven top down. Okay, I think second part is, and we alluded to that to your earlier question on SMBs, is to really think of technology or digital not as essential infrastructure, to think about the ROI game. Look at each business function, look at your supply chain and say, what does digital supply chain mean? How can my supply chain be a lot more efficient? Your questions have to be right. And how can digital play a role? If you are responsible for production or running your factories, imagine what does a digital factory really mean? How can I use technology such as Internet of Things to really automate and make your production functions so very intelligent that they are more efficient? So I am using my resources more efficiently. How am I selling what I am producing to my consumers the right way? How do you use digital marketing to reach out to the right consumer right way? How do I develop newer channels, cost-effective, scalable channels to reach out to the business? So you need to be expert in what you have always been doing, but you need to ask the right question and frame the right ROI. Think about where am I, where I need to go, and then you plan technology level 1, technology level 2, technology level 3, moving me from an efficiency level 1 to efficiency level 3, and you will figure out that almost 80% of all technology that you need the budgets can just come from efficiencies or growth in your revenue. So that, I think, this is the second point. The third point is realizing that cultures in the organization don't change very easily. Okay, so you need to have sweet, small wins. Okay, sometimes what organizations do, as a technologist, if you ask me, my first thinking will be you got to get your foundation right, and your old infrastructure should give way to new digital infrastructure, and that's important. But more and more that I deal with the business leaders, I sort of force myself into holding back that cold transformation and say, let's think of some micro experiences. Think about that one way a life of one of the stakeholders will change. What are the moments of truth in the lives of your consumer, of your employees, of your partners? What are the opportunities where digitally you can detect that moment of truth? So let me give you an example. You're driving to the airport, you know you're late, anxious. You reach the airport gate and you are just rushing to get the thing done. Now, my moment of truth is whether I'm going to be able to catch the flight. Okay. Now, I may have built a fantastic digital consumer engagement platform in the organization. I may have a beautiful app that I use to book airline tickets and figure out my reward points. But all that doesn't matter to me. At that point, the moment of truth is, will I be able to catch the flight? Now, can you as an organization realize that this is my moment of truth? Are you thinking like this? Are you thinking about each consumer persona and the moments of truth and saying, can I digitally detect that moment of truth? It's so very simple. You use Google Maps to track where you are. Your spouse knows where exactly you are when you're going. So it's not very difficult for an organization to track his or her consumer and saying, Puneet has just reached the airport. I know Puneet has booked a ticket. It's 15 minutes to gate closing. And a message pops up, say, hey Puneet, you know what? You're late. So don't even bother running. You're not going to make up. Go to counter number 7. There is John waiting for you there. We will make sure that we'll get you on the next flight. That's the interaction that I want from that. So these are the micro experiences that I'm talking about. Or it says, you know what, Puneet, I know you are late, but flight is running late 10 minutes. Okay, so we have already organized a boarding pass for you, collect it, and just head to the gate. Somebody will make sure you board it. So your ability to spot those moments of truth and create the right micro experiences, you have to create those successes. And you create 1 or 2 small such success stories, and the organization around you will get excited by what the art of possible is. Because ultimately, most people in good organizations are intelligent people. They are people with high IQ. They understand business very well. It's just that they've so gotten used to a particular way of doing things that somebody needs to shake them. You either shake them top down by sort of threatening their existence, or you inspire them into doing the change. So I think that's very important. Think about micro experiences and you do it. Now, once you start doing these 1 micro experience, 2 micro experience, there are perhaps 100 such micro experiences you need to create. You now smartly start figuring out, every time I create a micro experience, let me insert 1 Lego block in the overall digital platform that we need to do. So that's not a question of the few $1 million that you will invest doing the core upgrade and nobody will see any benefit. You're building those apps, those micro experiences which are making it happen while building. So I think these are the 2 or 3 dimensions. Just to reiterate, technology not be seen strategically top down, not being a top CEO or a board agenda. Second is not thinking about the right ROI constructs. Okay, sort of framing opportunities as problems, as technology problems, as opposed to I need to optimize my supply chain or I need to optimize the way my production runs. And third is focusing on those essential micro experience driven wins which can potentially transform your culture.
So Puneet, Internet of Things is creating new technological waves. Please share some examples on how IoT is impacting our lives.
So I think among the few phenomena that I'm inspired a lot about, one is definitely Internet of Things, and the impact is in many ways already around us, and there is a lot more that can be done. Why I'm very excited about Internet of Things, that it feels like, why were we not doing things like this? If you really think about it, we as users, we have adopted computing and it has changed our ways. We use emails, we use instant messages, we communicate people when we are late, we track where we are going, but all the infrastructure and machineries around us they they never sort of enjoyed the power of information technology. It was like information technology was for the first great citizen, which is human beings, and everybody else doesn't get that. But just as when I fall ill, I am able to talk to somebody in my family or a doctor and get myself corrected, why should a machine not be able to do that? So imagine a machine, it's sort of like giving a little bit of consciousness to all the assets and objects all around us, right? So it's the machine is constantly working 24/7. The vibration patterns is increasing. It's feeling that, hey, something is not right with me. This is not how I vibrate. This is not how I operate. The temperature is high. And the machine observes this and sends a message to the supervisor, says, come take care of me, otherwise I'm going to fall ill and from tomorrow I will stop working. And if this information or this insight can be given at the right time and preventive maintenance can be done, the uptime and the production that you can get from an asset can increase. So I think fundamentally this opportunity of getting every asset to become intelligent, sort of self-aware, build in that little bit of consciousness, and therefore take this advantage of everything being connected, workflow, actions, triggers, I think is the IoT opportunity. To your question, what are the big opportunities? I would say, look at everything around us and figure out what does the smart equivalent of that is. Okay, you are in this building. What will happen if this building were to become smart? By tracking whether there are people sitting inside this room or not, this room can turn off the lights, turn off the heating, turn off the air conditioning. Imagine if it is done at a large scale, the kind of power usage and environmental impact that it will produce. Look at how homes are becoming smarter. Okay, the front door gate is now smart and figures out that somebody is there. And if you're not around, you can get an alert on your phone saying, hey, I see somebody out there and here is a pic and you may want to do what you want to do. You add some dose of artificial intelligence to it. Now you have cameras who are not just recording images, but they're seeing what they can see. Hey, I can see a suspicious looking person with a weapon in the hand, and how should I be doing it? You're in an airport area, the cameras are looking at it. So the infrastructure is becoming smart. Surveillance is no longer being done from a control room with a bunch of people who may not be alert all the time. The infrastructure is constantly seeing that is happening. So that's smart infrastructure. Imagine the impact it can create. Look at the kind of impact it can create for rural India. A country like India spread all around. In cities, things are concentrated. You can provide high level of services. Look at a service as simple as water pumps. Hundreds and thousands of these water pumps are put up in remote areas. Now, it is not economically viable to first put those pumps and then have people go around and constantly seeing every day or every week whether the pump is working right. So the end result, a huge part of the infrastructure, money was spent, never works. Now, if these pumps can be self-aware with IoT solution, they can let somebody know in the district headquarters, hey, I've stopped working. Come and do it. So imagine the kind of uptime and cost efficiencies you can bring in. Look at what in very near future our cars is going to be, right? A car being aware of itself, knowing when it is time to get it serviced. That's going to begin to happen in every piece of equipment that you will have at home. Your washing machine knows when it wants to be serviced. Your water purifier knows when it is. The way city traffic is managed. IoT can enable the same traffic lights with the aid of cameras and other sensors to self-regulate themselves. The pollution levels in the city. So it's like the entire physical infrastructure has become a little bit like us. They can breathe and sense that the pollution level is higher. They can sense that traffic level is very higher. The infrastructure can sense that somebody wrong, perhaps trying to do something wrong, is there. Your factories, and that I think the example that I gave you about a piece of machinery knowing what their health status is an incredible example. As these production facilities start getting automated, start using IoT, their uptime, their efficiencies will increase, and in the impact will be the world will be able to produce more with less, more with sustainability, and it will impact your life and mine. So I think it's a very fundamental phenomena, and IoT for the first time is letting technology move beyond human beings into the world around us, and that's a huge opportunity.
So artificial intelligence is the next much hyped thing. Do you feel that organizations at times are avoiding the long-term view while implementing AI?
So you're going to say that every technology that you could ask a question about, and my answer is going to be this is the topic I'm most passionate about, because like IoT that I talked about, which is very fundamental to the way technology is going to pervade into real world. I think AI is one such phenomena. Perhaps a phenomena will level of impact even deeper and higher than that. Look at how our world has changed using technology, using internet, using mobile applications, using internet. Okay, for everything from shopping to healthcare to education to ordering a car, there is an application out there which has changed the way we live. You pay all your bills online. But if you really see this piece of software or this application or the internet as we see, which has changed our world without any doubt, it has been a new era in the whole evolution of human life. If you fundamentally observe, it is still not very intelligent. These applications are, and I don't like to use the word, they are dumb at a level, right? You go to that ticket booking application that you use to book your tickets. Beautiful looking application. They have changed the way we travel. Great. But ultimately, if you see deep down, these are pieces of codes which are just infinitely repeating themselves. Enter the city, enter the destination, enter the date, I give you 5 answers. Enter it again, I give you 5 answers. You change the date, I give you an answer. At best, it has become intelligent that I have put my hometown as Bangalore 5 times, so next time it doesn't give me the pain of entering Bangalore. But that's the level of intelligence. That's like if I were you to draw an IQ equivalent, they're operating an IQ level of 20. Now imagine this same internet, which has changed our world, were beginning to get intelligent. From IQ of 20 to IQ of 30 to 40, a little bit more intelligent, IQ of 80, 100, they start thinking. Imagine what your experience is. You are trying to plan I consider myself as truly embedded in digital in the way I do things. But when it comes to planning a holiday, I'm never able to get it done online. Okay? But if I'm talking to a travel concierge next doors or over a phone or sitting, the way the thing gets planned is so very easy. Okay? The application is more efficient as telling me right prices, right times, and this bugger takes a whole lot of time. But there's something about this intelligent conversation. Okay, what are you feeling like? You know what, is it important or can you go a day earlier? There may be other options that you may want to look like. You want to be relaxed, you want to just go around. These are small human conversations which results in decision making, because most of the time, while we think we know what we want, we are in the process of deciding what you want. Okay, and most of the system around us is designed around the paradigm that I know exactly what I want. Tell me, press the button, get the answer. So I think AI has great potential in making everything around us intelligent, and as it starts doing it, we have an opportunity to create perhaps 5-10 times the kind of economic impact that internet revolution has done in the next 20 years. From look at the way learning takes place. I have a challenge. I have a 10-year, 11-year-old daughter, and like most parents, it's very difficult to get them to pay attention. I am busy, I get some time, I would want to sit with her and make her study, but she is distracted, she knows what she wants. It's very difficult to engage in a deep learning experience. So I was dealing with this problem and I was trying to figure out how do I solve it. Okay, either sort of make her change her way of doing things, or I realized that when I teach her, and once I have figured out the personality that my daughter is, if I have to teach her maths, I will ask her one question and second question, and I figure out she seems to be getting it. So let's not spend time asking 4 other questions, because she's going to get tired at the 7th question. So the only thing that I have available is the 7 intelligent questions that I can ask her, which can sort of help her get trained. I ask her some question and figure out if she's having some struggle. Let me ask a simpler question and see whether she has gotten the concept. That's how an intelligent mind sort of thinks, thinking about that problem called that personal. Schools don't operate like this. They have to deal with 50 students and all of them are one. Online learning systems, they don't know whether it is a Nupur or a Puneet or a Khushi. They're just throwing 100 questions at you. At the end of it, they will tell you how proficient you are. And my hypothesis was that perhaps I can find out, because I'm her father, I can find out after the 17th question what she is, and that's what AI can do. Can you build intelligent systems which can understand the user that you are dealing with, which can adapt the way it works? And my hypothesis is, and I've been talking to a lot of startups trying to build solutions like this, and more I think about it getting validated, that if you were to use an intelligent system, at the 15th question you can get the same level of insight that you will get at 17th. That's the kind of efficiency, 1/5 reduction in effort for the same output. That's the level of impact. I'm giving you a very simple example of education. The same can be applied to healthcare. You would have heard examples about Google DeepMind experiments or IBM Watson examples. There are enough examples where an artificial intelligence system looking at an X-ray or your MRI image can detect a cancer far better than a doctor can do. And they have repeated this test over hundreds of thousands of records, that they're saying the success rate of a sort of an AI doctor is higher. And medical profession is being changed. Although it's a conservative profession, so step 1, we are saying, hey, the moment all the test results comes, let the AI doctor look at it and give the recommendations to the final doctor. Now with less time and less energy spent, the doctor can give better advice. Cars, with self-driving car, 6-7 years back, I remember when Google started playing around with all those things, people used to say that these guys have gotten crazy. Enough money to spend and they have to have cars that drive themselves. But it sort of seems like reality. And the first time I took a ride in a self-driving car, and it sort of changed my perspective. It was shock for the first 15 seconds, then worry for another 30-40 seconds, and then it felt that future has arrived. Okay, the level of complexity that's there on roads, it's not a problem that traditional computing can handle. AI is changing that world. So I think it is a revolution which is going to change the world in so many different ways. Like that smart connotation I gave you when you asked the question about IoT application. If your home, and what's a smart home? If it's a city, what's a smart city? If it's a building, what is smart city? I think it's the same way you look at everything and you say, what's the intelligent X? What's the intelli X of something? And AI can apply that. So I think the potential is so huge, and as a result, what is happening? It's a sexy topic, right? So everybody is talking about, and therefore a hype has been created where all of us are so restless. We want our cars to be that self-driving cars today, because we hear about that every day, and therefore what happens is when you hear about something way too much, you get into disillusionment very soon. Hey, the world is talking about it. This seems like another fad that will go away. We have been hearing about it so much and nothing is happening. So I think AI has gotten into that situation. It is such a fundamental phenomena which will define the future in more ways than one. But because of the over communication and over hype, there is a little bit of disillusionment, and therefore people are sort of beginning to take it casually, but which is a threat. Okay, I think when we started our conversation and we talked about enterprises and the CEOs looking at technology strategically, they need to have a specific view of what does AI mean for my business, how I can apply AI. So you have to have a very strategic view that it is something which is going to be so horizontal. Just as I need to have great people, I need to have a great infrastructure, I need to have the solid intelligent foundation. But again, like anything digital, you got to create some small wins so that this disillusionment turns into creative energy that can take you to the next line. I sense that seems to be the challenge. People are inspired that a lot of exciting things are happening, but beginning to feel that it is not for me, or let me wait a little bit because I've heard so much, and that can sort of sometimes creates a block. I said that's the problem that happens when you create too much hype about it. And I'm struggling to use word used too much because I think the potential is really huge. So person like me, I don't mind the hype that is getting created because I think even that hype represents a fraction of the opportunity. But broadly, what is happening is that sort of people are being driven by the excitement, and the problem is the same problem that we talked about earlier. The best problems or best problems to be solved or best solution propositions are very commonsensically defined. When you start using too many keywords and there's that new lingo, you know something is getting wrong. If you're saying, I will implement the chatbot, which is intelligent, which is what everybody is trying to do, that's a wrong framing of doing things. The right way to frame is, hey, customer communication and customer service is a very important part of my business. Okay, I was talking to somebody, they're saying a small business has grown up very fast, but they have realized that in a very short period of time, they have a contact center team of 100 people who are just taking care of the calls that people are getting. And I cannot not do this. This is so very essential, but it is taking such precious effort away from me. Now, can I use AI to divert part of that bandwidth to intelligent machines who can help the consumer self-service herself, as opposed to putting in so much investment there? And if I am able to save that or reduce that by 50%, the remaining 50% I can use to productively put in my business. That's the right problem statement. So if you're saying, hey, I'm not professing to be an AI expert and I'm not going to tell you you need a chatbot A versus chatbot B, but how would you intelligently use AI or chatbot-like services that I have been hearing a lot to reduce the contact center transaction volume, move more and more people to self-service? You ask the right question and you will get the right solution. I think that's the problem. It's not about technology. It's about not framing the problem and the solution right.
Puneet, what all technologies you see flourishing 5 years down the line?
So this is a question I would love to answer, and I'm going to sort of struggle to figure out identifying the top 5 or top 6. Okay, as I said, without any doubt, artificial intelligence is the biggest phenomena that will reshape everything around us next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And more I think about it, I feel the world my daughter will inherit will be a world which I would not be able to recognize. That's how dramatically different it is going to be. So I think AI is a big phenomena. We talked about IoT, I think big phenomena. And as the planet is moving from sort of, this planet is today supporting 7.5, 8 billion people to 10 billion, 12 billion beyond, I think we will have to be so efficient at everything we do if we were to sort of in a sustainable manner serve the essential needs of everybody. So IoT, I think, is an important phenomena that is required to get that level of efficiencies. Third phenomena that I feel deeply excited about is this whole phenomena of immersive experiences. Okay, this shift from PCs to laptops to mobile and mobile phones and tablets, and then we cannot sort of imagine sort of living our life without these mobile phones, right? They're so essential part of how you're living. So computing has become so much more powerful in my hand. Okay, and while we do not look at it in that sense, but we truly are cyborgs in some sense. We are actually man and machine combination. So you ask me about the most complex question in the world, I know the answer. It doesn't come from here, it comes from here, but I know it, right? So I think the entire knowledge base of the world is available to me, but it is still the computing experience is still external to me, right? You have to do a particular task to get it done. Now, I think what's beginning to happen with voice technologies, the Alexas, the Google Homes of the world, is that some of this interaction is becoming natural, right? So many times you're sitting together having a debate and you're saying, my daughter has this, no, this is not Katy Perry, this is Taylor Swift. And I say, Alexa, who's the singer of this song? And she just solves it for you. It's a very natural way. I'm not picking up the phone from Margaret. It's like I'm talking to my wife, I'm talking to somebody around me. So I think that's, but then you take another step forward, augmented reality, virtual reality. I think we are in very early days, but the moment you put in that virtual reality headset, I could be sitting here and this is the physical constraint. I could now find myself in a different world. I could be in Mars, I could be sitting in a studio in New York. So suddenly there is an ability to expand my conscious perceptions to worlds, and the way students could be wearing these headsets here, and there could be 15 students somewhere in Africa, 15 somewhere in United States, all of them put the headsets and they're together in a class which is being taught by the topmost teachers in the world. We are on the verge of that revolution. The world will truly become very very small and connected, and you just take a step forward, and that's my inspiration. Today, when you ask me about what's the weather like in Indonesia, okay, I will ask Google, and Google will give me a response. The moment we go to man and mind interface, so this whole virtual reality headset, which is like a bulky device like this, it will keep becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. Tomorrow, already Google Glass has given us a view that it will be some addition to a glass, so I can see that augmented information all around me. I meet you after some time and I've forgotten and I'm embarrassed, but the system says, hey, this is Nupur, you met her in the month of March here. It's augmenting. And then the final stage is these embedding computers starting interfacing with your mind. Today also, these virtual reality devices are creating an artificial world by you by sending a signal through your eye. You see through your mind. Eye is just a conduit to that. So the next step is going to be, I'm going to create a Google query by thinking about it. I will think, what's the weather like in Indonesia? And the response comes as a thought, as opposed to a screen here or Alexa speaking out in my head. It comes as a thought. Imagine when that happens. Every human being is a superhuman. All the world's knowledge is accessible to everybody. What's the purpose of education and what should be taught, what should not be taught, and how should we do, it will change. So I think this immersiveness of computing is perhaps another big phenomena that we need to look at. I think robotics and this world where men and machines work together, I think it's an incredible opportunity. We perhaps don't see it in a day-to-day life, but if you do follow the evolution happening in this space, it's amazing. From these robots with enormous amount of flexibility, agility in the way they work, to obviously AI-powered subtle articulations of emotions, and to exoskeletons that human beings can put, like you see in movies. And suddenly, if you are an Amazon employee working in the warehouse, suddenly you wear an exoskeleton and you can lift an entire pallet as a human being. So there is enormous amount of revolution that is happening. So this world where we will increasingly start seeing, so this group we are meeting together, perhaps the interviewer could be a machine, perhaps the cameraman could be a machine, perhaps the person person who's responding could be a machine. So I think that's another world. So what will it take to get the human and machines to work together as one? There's a lot of exciting stuff that is happening in science fiction and television dealing with some of those topics, and I think that's exciting. So I think, and then there is obviously this whole phenomena of what cloud computing has done for you and I think it will just keep expanding. Okay, I was just talking to somebody, and as I was talking about, I remember when I came out of the college, 3-4 years into my first job, I was thinking about doing my startup. And I was just trying to look at my notes, old notes, and it felt like I was so bogged down about the infrastructure, computing, servers. It was like even before I think about my idea and the solution, getting technology to even start thinking was difficult. Today, if I have a motivated soul with a bunch of idea, I can be using a low-cost phone and get a Geo internet connection, get a free subscription on Amazon. I could spin up my startup as a single person. All I need is under 15,000, 20,000 rupees worth of infrastructure, and I can get going. And I think this is going to become better and better. Every developer would have access to the same level of artificial intelligence that only deep labs will have through the cloud computing interfaces. So I think these are some of the important areas. Now, as a digital software technologies, these are the areas that I track. Blockchain is one thing that I didn't talk about. I think it's paramount. I think, again, it goes to the dialogue we were having earlier about internet and how it has changed life. And then say, can you make internet intelligent, and what will happen? How do you make internet trustworthy? How do you build applications that have an intrinsic ability to trust each other? I can engage with somebody I know lot easily compared to somebody I'm meeting for the first time. There's a lot of cognitive load dealing with trust and issues of trust, and the same thing is applicable. The world is putting enormous amount of dollars in putting security. So your basic need is this, but you need this much of security dollars to put on it, because you can't trust the world out there. How do you build applications which are aware and which can trust each other, and that resulting in potentially organizations which are what I would like to call as distributed autonomous organization. Tomorrow, companies which are run by software. Imagining an Amazon without an Amazon, or a Uber without an Uber. A company which from top to bottom is run by software. And actually, if you think about it, why do you need human beings in Uber? I have an application, I look for a car, an algorithm is doing it. It is identifying what the car is, request comes, car comes to me, and payment is being done. So in Uber, you just need some software people to build it, but once you have built it, you could have an algorithm which is just managing it. Why do I need the company, the 15,000, 20,000, 50,000 people in Amazon doing what Amazon? An algorithm says, Puneet needs something, somebody in Chennai has that stuff. You just connect them online and have automated logistics in between. So I think technologies like blockchain would enable those kind of possibilities. So these are some of the technologies that I think will impact us in more ways than one.
So one question that is coming to my mind right now is, technology definitely is making our life simpler, but I feel there is a lack of human interactions that is happening. Is it somewhere impacting the compassion or the empathy we all had previously, or our previous generations had?
Yeah, no, I think it's a powerful question, and I will perhaps attempt to sort of scratch the surface. I think it's a deep, very important, very significant question. No clear right and wrong answers. I think the intrinsic reactions typically are these mobile phones are causing a distraction. You're not spending time with your friends, so stop using it. I think that 1 and 0 approach to these worries are immature and not very effective solutions. The problem really is about really understanding how a particular technology can improve our lives. Now, when you start doing a new way of doing things, it has side effects. Okay, so if you get negative about the same, because human mind is like this, we are at our creative best when we are positive about it. And our conversation started with the fact that the CEOs need to be really excited about the art of the possible. Okay, so I think if you are passionate and you feel this instrument is powerful, you will figure out creative ways. The way we teach our children perhaps has to change. So rather than blaming that poor mobile and the poor applications on the mobile phones, let us blame ourselves in the way we were teaching. Because our teaching, when we describe our sensibility, the mannerisms, etc., they were done in a previous world. In a new world, our way of doing things are very different. So I think we got to look at it holistically. And there are other, just the opposite examples. You made a very important point about empathy. I was having this conversation about designing virtual reality applications the right way. Okay, and the more I was thinking that look at the way we live our life. Televisions, every day you turn on a television, some tragedy has happened somewhere. I don't think it never happened earlier. We never used to come to know about it. But you hear about it, you sometimes feel sad for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then you move on. Sometimes you will not even stop that cracking of the joke that was going on because it's happening. So I think human mind is such that when you are away from a situation, the further you are away, the empathy is less. Okay. So I was talking to somebody about this project where bunch of journalists, okay, they said, hey, why don't we start telecasting news story from virtual reality 360-degree video? So imagine there is a earthquake that has caused a lot of destruction. Now, if you see this in static TV news and it's happening somewhere, you'll feel bad, but you'll not get that kind of empathy because we have been overburdened by all this information. But if you experience that news story in virtual reality, where when you see that, you are actually standing in the center of destruction, you're moving your head around and you see what's the wreckage, the destruction. And your mind sees what the eyes shows the mind. And because you feel you are in a lot more proximity and you can just move around and see it, enough research has shown that, and it's very commonsensical also, do this, that the empathetic response that you will get by looking at some small piece of toy that you see next to you will have more emotional response than all the visuals of destruction. So I think technology can if used the right way. The same way with cars, right? We didn't have cars, and therefore the way we used to spend time moving around, and we had our social life, and now so I think the problem is real, but the answer will come only if you realize that the world has changed.
There's no definite solution.
There is no definite solution, and the world has changed. The way you understand, you influence, you decide has changed. And therefore, if you have to teach empathy, you have to teach empathy in the new construct. The answer cannot be going back to the old world. Okay, if you and I was having this debate with somebody, and as you can see, I'm so very passionate about the new world, so you will find me more defensive about this. But it's like I was saying, the kids looking at the phones and watching videos and not interacting. I was saying that there were kids who were so excited about reading books that they lock themselves in a room and they read books, and somehow that book seems lot human, not natural to us, but the same e-book that you read on the phone or the video, we have changed from one medium to another. It seems very different. So I think any piece of technology, including a book, could distract you from the real world because you'll start falling in love with the life that the storyteller is telling. So I guess it's about first being very positive that this new world is here to stay. There's so much beauty in the new world, and then figuring out how do we train, what should be the new mannerisms, what should be the right social pressures in the new world. And if we I think look at it constructively, hopefully solutions will come.
So Puneet, as you mentioned, AI is making technology smarter, and hence humans are being more dependent on technology rather than using their own brain. Will it make their brain a bit slow?
It's a very smart question, actually, and I have thought about it many times. I remember long time back when we had the first PDAs, the Windows CE personal digital devices, and I bought one and I was flaunting it around, and there was somebody who made this comment, hey, you guys will keep using this device, you will stop using your mind. And my instinctive reaction, because I had to defend, was whether it doesn't matter whether I remember or the PDA remembers. What's important is that we remember the task needs to be done. Okay, so my thinking was always that technology is an augmentation which will make us better. Okay, now if you look at it the right way, there was a time when we didn't have automobiles. I'm sure human beings had much stronger legs, much stronger limbs, because we had to run around. Automobiles came and it expanded our world. And human beings evolved over a period of time, right? Perhaps we are physically not as stronger than our yesteryear's forefathers were, but our world has becoming bigger, okay? So it shifted from pure physical skills, motor skills, to intellectual skills. Today's survival, in today's, if you look at and imagine, if you talk to evolutionary scientists, if you talk about what will human beings be 200 years down the line, now if you believe in what evolution tells us, things that help us survive are the things that get propagated. So no longer the most physically fit people are surviving, right? If you are economically well and you can get the best of the healthcare, there may be physically weak people who may be sitting in the wheelchairs and they may be ruling the world, because the intellectual dimension, the cognitive dimension of your mind is becoming more significant. Now, I think that same evolution is continuing. Now, the cognitive abilities also you can break down into multiple levels. The base level is about remembering. The higher level is about creativity. Okay, just as our legs got weaker, but whatever brains got stronger, perhaps our intellectual ability related to remembering will become weaker. But if we can have those embedded implants that we are sort of getting to, where the entire database of knowledge that Google has is available to me, I need to think and I need to respond. Perhaps it is efficient in tomorrow's world that is a part of the human brain which was focused on remembering will sort of degrow itself, and the part of the human brain which focuses on creative skills, artistic skills, and other sort of typical right brain characteristics will evolve. So I think, to me, it is like evolution, but in the transition we will have this, and I'm telling you, I feel that. I don't know whether it is technology which has to do with the fact that I feel worried sometimes about my memory. Remembering is, I get into a hotel, and even if I'm staying in the hotel for 6 days, I never remember the room number, 3-digit room number. At one stage, I was so damn worried, and I met 5 doctors and said everything is okay. That's fine. But but if there is something that excites me, I could have engaged in a conversation, creative conversation 15 years back, and I will remember the essence of that. So I think our minds are sort of fluid and plastic, and they are sort of organizing itself. And over a long term, I think, and it's a common question that people ask: what happens when man-machine starts working together, right? We are even talking about a world tomorrow where the concept of currency or money goes away, right? The world is in autopilot, and all the basic needs of everybody is taken care of. You don't have to worry about food, you don't have to worry about essential living, etc. Machines are doing everything that you do. All those cartoons about somebody sitting on the bed and then a piece of grape coming to your face, that will sort of become reality, because that's so in that world, if we have to survive, or those who will survive, who will figure out the next cognitive levels, you should perhaps, and that conversation, if you remember before the interview we were having about my daughter, and we're saying you can either become a zombie consuming the content, or you start becoming the creator, you can start doing that. So perhaps the inspiration is, can you be the architect of the new world as opposed to being the resident of the new world? Because the resident perhaps will be a lot more zombie-like, but there will be some who will. So I think it's an interesting question to ask. We must keep thinking that, okay, all the time. But yeah, I'm positive about the fact that I think all this automation will give us more opportunity. Okay, but then there are some essentials. See, do our forefathers ever used to talk about gymming? Changing is an alien concept because we have realized that this new world order doesn't require me to run around this thing, but then evolution will happen when it will happen. My body is going to be the same body while it is today, and therefore you figure out some exercises to do that. So I guess we will have to figure out some of the short-term impacts via some artificial interventions that we will need to do. But the inspiration is that I think our higher order cognitive abilities will keep getting sharper.
Now, to sum it up, what is the one piece of advice you have for implementing digital transformation effectively?
So I think my summary would be, number one, be inspired by what you are happening. I think there is so much that is happening that only way you will be able to constructively move forward is that you feel inspired and mesmerized by it all. You got to see the beauty and magic of everything that is happening. That's very important. Second is realizing that the world around us has changed. My consumer, my end user has changed in more ways than me. And perhaps the change there is more dramatic than it has happened to me. And therefore, sort of rethinking about how I need to wire my organization differently. Third, as a result, figuring out that I cannot relegate technology or digital to another infrastructural piece that somebody in the organization will keep running. Just as there is somebody to take care of security and electricity, there is somebody to take care of technology. That's not going to be right. It has to be top-down driven. The CEOs, and I said perhaps even boards, need to be pushed, trained and enabled. A smart CEO needs to train them, take them around the world, show them examples of how world is changing so that they feel inspired about doing that. I think number four, you need real small wins. Okay, so rather than making those big transformation programs where you spend millions of dollars and don't you see your world changing, do it in a hybrid approach. Figure out some of your stakeholders. Like I described earlier, figure out what are some of the moments of truth in their lives that you can touch using digital and make an impact. Okay, create those magical examples 1 and 2 and 3 so that people around feel that yeah, there is a new world and we too can take steps around it. And then while you do that, you obviously create the right foundation. And finally, use common sense. And I like the question that you asked earlier about AI and there being so much buzz and people sort of feeling that there is more buzz than reality, and doing things just because you feel that it's cool to do that. I think frame the problems right. Don't use heavy jargon and use things for the sake of things. Describe your problem and describe the solution. Bring in an ROI, return on investment construct in everything. The moment you are thinking about technology as a cost equation, it will always going to be about mess, because that money can be spent in so many other problems. The moment you think about how I am going to improve my top line or bottom line by solving a problem or looking at an opportunity using technology, you will figure out that the game changes it. Each application, each solution funds itself. And the final point is, I think there is so much to do, and we talked about perhaps 5 or 6 examples of great technologies. Each of them are sort of topics in themselves. Is that you need to change the culture of your organization to do that. Okay, one thing that we didn't talk about it, perhaps let me make use of this opportunity to say that there is so much of uncertainty in the way things are happening today. That's the new normal. We always were very used to defining what we want, knowing exactly how we want to. You can do a mental experiment and know if you do it right, what will happen. There are so many things which are changing around us, so we do not know exactly what you need to do. So you need to be agile in what you do. You need to fail fast where you can do. So therefore, you need to create a culture where you are supporting innovative thinking more than the predictability of success, and bring the right blood, right new leaders, give young people the right emphasis that is required. So I think these will be some of my recommendations about how you should holistically think about it. I think there's enormous opportunity all around us. I know for sure that the world 5, 10, 15 years down the line is going to be so much different from where it is. And only way not to get mad and crazy about it is to be excited about what it is and then do what you can do.
Certainly. Thank you, Puneet. I mean, it was wonderful having you with us. And thanks for sharing the futuristic vision of what digital transformation can do for us. And thanks for sharing what all you had.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.